For my independent project this semester, I wanted to produce a short product shoot using Unreal Engine 5. Now, Unreal isn't entirely new to me. I have had some experience using it in the past to varying levels of success, but with the growing threat of AI replacing many creative roles, I wanted to broaden my skill set to learn some harder to replicate skills and push myself to work in a software which I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with. I had originally had the idea to work with environment production or game design, but after a little bit of reflection, producing a product shoot seems a lot more of a versatile idea, as I'd have the opportunity to explore with framing, lighting and composition. But primarily, I wanted to build a solid foundation of Unreal's tools which I can use in the future. Honestly, the hardest part of this project was starting and opening up Unreal for the first time. As somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about the software, opening it looks a bit like this. Seeing a blank cube in the middle of a blank environment can be quite daunting at first, especially after seeing what Unreal is capable of in my research. I was able to build a basic 3-point lighting setup. To be fair, I was surprised by just how realistic Unreal's lighting simulation was, and this was only using default settings and no plugins. Once I had the basic lighting setup, I wanted to experiment with adding cameras. These allowed me to replicate real-world studio setups, and once set up, they were surprisingly intuitive to control, and the results looked pretty good. Right from the beginning, one thing that seemed quite daunting to me was producing the assets for this project. Originally, I had planned to make all of these in Blender, but this seemed a bit counterintuitive, so after a bit of research, I discovered that it's actually common practice for digital studios to purchase and work with pre-made assets from sites such as TurboSquid, Sketchfab, and Epic Games, who created Unreal Engine, also have some assets available. These help to create more realistic final outputs, while also saving time and money that would otherwise be spent on modelling assets. I then started to look for an object that could refract or reflect light to test Unreal Engine's lighting capabilities. I settled on a drinks can, and after some searching I found this can pack on Free3D. I downloaded the pack and imported it into Unreal Engine, but something was wrong. The can looked jagged, it looked a bit low poly, which, considering that the purpose of this project is to replicate real life shoots, this was a slight problem. Fortunately, the solution to this was actually quite simple. All I had to do was make some adjustments in Blender. This ended up being a happy accident as I learned how to transfer and optimize 3D assets, still a useful skill nevertheless. When it came time to produce the shots I needed for this project, I decided to change my approach and work in Unreal Engine's photo studio. The lighting and the positioning did take some time to get to my liking, however after creating the cameras and adding the object, I was able to get some pretty realistic shots. I also added some keyframes to make the object move. Once I had the basic shots down, I wanted to start combining them using Unreal Engine's sequence editor. Previously, this had been a heavy struggle of mine, so I was a bit apprehensive about working on this stage of the project. After re-attempting the workflow several times, I began to find working with sequences simple, and I was surprised by the fluidity of the animations and the quality of the cameras. Now, it is common practice to do full scenes using Unreal sequences. However, for the sake of simplicity and reducing the risk of error when it came to making the final scene, I produced each shot in separate level sequences and rendered them individually. The sequencer in Unreal is quite temperamental in my experience, and I often found that small mistakes could break entire scenes, which meant I spent countless hours rebuilding shots. But once I had the basics of creating and cutting between shots down, I wanted to focus on texture, specifically adding water droplets to the can to get a realistic look. In real life, this effect is quite straightforward to achieve. Not in Unreal. In Unreal, it requires working in node systems. Now, the first attempt of this didn't go so well. I followed a YouTube tutorial that wasn't the clearest, and while I don't have an image of the final output, here's an artist's impression. So I went back to a drawing board and decided to work in the node setup still, but using normal maps instead. This was much more effective and helped me to create a realistic but reflective texture. Working with nodes in this way was challenging and took several attempts. However, once I got used to the workflow, I enjoyed the freedom it granted. I was even able to place an image texture underneath. However, this also made the whole can red, so I had to fix that a bit later on. After developing a foundational understanding of the skills required to create a basic shoot, it was then time to combine them all to produce the final product. Fortunately, the repetition of these steps prior made the process quite simple. I was able to develop that foundation that I was hoping to build at the start of this project, and I was able to produce most of the shots I wanted quite quickly. Weirdly enough, the biggest challenge was texturing these lemons I wanted to add in the background for a bit of extra motion. I kid you not, these took a lot of refinement to get right. To add some extra realism, I also decided to experiment with adjusting the focal length and manual focus on the digital cameras, and this helped to make the shots look a lot more realistic. I had also planned to include camera plugins, however due to time constraints I was unable to add them, so going forward plugins are definitely something that I would like to look into. And overall, I now have a strong foundational understanding of Unreal Engine, and before starting this project, working in the software felt overwhelming, but now I can confidently set up a digital studio, light scenes effectively, produce materials from scratch, and source/optimize assets. While I didn't have time to explore plugins or particle effects, I now have a strong foundation to build on. I no longer feel intimidated by using the software. In fact, I'm quite excited to continue growing my skills and seeing what's next.